down there, and it's very isolated. Right in the midst of the first and second but this year, I wanted this location. We're having dinner after. It was in January, the dry season.
Yes.
I think it's this time. I told them we don't really have leaders, but they come from that far. I mean, there's when I go to another country, we went to
I've seen his name, but I don't know.
Yeah, and then a friend of mine knows someone that lives there, and said,
Are the plants green?
So, yeah. So I don't go to all the tourist traps, right? Small world. It's a relaxing thing. It is, yeah. It's supposed to be a 3-hour job. 3 hours in, you're halfway down. Because the wind was down there. Yeah, and we were, just talking and not being in touch with them, like, that's been shorter here than Okay, you ready?
We are. Good evening, everyone. It is so nice to have you here this evening on Zoom and in person. And if you're on Zoom tonight, you can't tell, but we have about 25 really wonderful folks here, and it is just delightful to see so many of you and people I haven't seen in a long time in person.
There's that guy thing.
So that's okay. We got it. So anyhow, my name is Leslie, and I'm part of our all-volunteer committee. Cynthia's part of our committee. You were greeted by Lynn and Judy out front this evening, and then on Zoom we have Ann running the show there, and Pat Beekoff, and maybe Nancy Williamson, and Nancy there. You were hidden behind. I was looking for you. So, and Nancy Sheetsell as well. So great committee, and we want you to know that we're tonight celebrating 12 years of green drinks in McHenry County, which is really cool. And if you're, well, first of all, who's never been to green drinks before? See, new people right here tonight, and how about on Zoom? Because I can't see what's showing on Zoom. But if we have...
No hands up,
Nope, okay.
because some of these names are new, because I've not seen them before.
Good, so welcome everybody that's new, and if you didn't know much about green drinks before, we're going to tell you. Real quick. Now we're 12 years old, we made it this far. So this is something that started over in England a long time ago. People were just sitting, at a table, realized other people were sitting at a table talking about the same thing, which was environmental issues. And it has grown throughout the world. At the height, it's had about 600 places in the world, which is neat to know that we're part of something larger than just here in McHenry County. And right now, due to COVID, there's only about 327 currently meeting. We were really fortunate to have defenders help us be able to keep going. So that's why we've been able to meet through COVID. So we're one of those sites that has continued, which is really cool. Our co-sponsors then are Defenders of McHenry County and this great restaurant that we're in, which is Duke's. And here comes Zach, perfectly timed. He's going to come stand right here. My buddy, right? And he's going to talk a little bit about the restaurant and just take a moment here. So if you stand right there, you're good.
See me?
Yep.
Thank you, everybody, for coming and making it out in the storm of COVID. We really appreciate it. It's nice having actual people back in this room after all this, and then we get to celebrate a birthday for Green Drinks. So we're super excited we've been able to celebrate that for so many years here. We're definitely one of the longest standing Green Drinks that we know of. So we owe it to all of you guys for keeping us alive. So, and the great speakers that we do get as well. So we really enjoy hosting, and Duke's Ale House and Kitchen melds with the mindset, I think, perfectly of sustainability and doing whatever we can, whenever we possibly can, to make the world a better place for future generations and the health of its citizens as well. So that's our motto, and we are sticking by it just like you guys are. We've had to man some storm for, with COVID and everything, so I can't tell you how many people. I think it's just about everybody's conversation that grabs my hand or gets close and says, how are you guys doing? And we're doing well. We have great customers. We have a dedicated following, so we appreciate all the concern, and but I know it's some hard work on everybody else's end to get their fries in a to-go box or whatever the case may be. It's not quite as good as dining inside, but we're having that cold beer fresh off the draft, so it's a little bit different, but we still appreciate everybody that's been able to still come and enjoy the things that we offer. So we truly appreciate all the support. If you are here at Green Drinks, we do encourage you to either order something to go. You can do it right from your phone while you're sitting here, or you can order with the host before you come up, or order with the host on the way out while you have a beer at the bar, however you like to do it. So we do like to keep these events free, but we also appreciate any support that you can give us to keep on doing it. But we'll be here regardless. So, but thank you everyone so much for coming, and we're really looking forward to tonight. And enjoy speaker.
Back to my speech here. So thanks, Zach. And over 12 years of time, Zach has had 3 children. Right?
I remember.
Yeah, 3. Remember? Yeah. Which is just so fun to have known folks for so long and enjoyed, right?
Yeah.
And see what we've all been going through.
Oh yeah. 3 kids. 3 kids is what we've been going
3 kids in a great restaurant.
Yeah.
So anyway, we were talking a little bit about Green Drinks, and one of the fun things we do each month is to let you know where the new ones are. And in COVID time, there are 3 new ones. They're one's American at this point, which is Fairbanks, Alaska. Oh, anybody been to Fairbanks? Yeah, good. I haven't done it yet, but one day. 2 other places, one in South America, which is San Pedro, Buenos Aires, Argentina. Anybody been down there? Which is how it was listed, by the way. I know Buenos Aires is separate. And then the other one is Poland, Germany. So if you've been to Germany, how's that? All right, there you go. So those are our 3 new places, and as we continue to heal from COVID, why I'm sure other places will start up again. But it's great to be able to celebrate ourselves as well this time. Just like in October, we are going to have.
So I know a lot of you have been keeping up on the fact that there needs to be, and there has been a lot of conversation for some years surrounding a clean energy
We can't
bill.
hear Cynthia.
Sorry.
Sorry, I forgot about that. I'm going to put this down for a second. So there's an energy bill that is currently being debated. It passed the Senate last evening in the state of Illinois, a clean energy bill. So we expect that by this time, Green Drinks next month, we'll have hopefully some really good news and speakers. So we're going to focus on the energy bill that's going to be passed next week. That really is a clean energy bill. So that's what's happening in October. And I have to let you know that hybrid is really bumming me out. I love seeing everybody. This is my favorite thing. But we are going to be fixing, thanks to Destiny, we're going to work on this. Because when we record, we get something that freezes up here but doesn't show to the public. So we may need a little few-minute break to make sure that this is working for everybody. Because we don't have anything in front of me. Okay. So anyway, that's my announcement. Give us a minute. Anne, are you still there?
Yes, and I can.
Everybody, talk amongst yourselves.
Hey Leslie, yeah, we can have the 1-minute announcements now.
Except the mayor.
Yeah.
Who's grown a garden this year? How's it going? The gardens. Who's got tomatoes? tomatoes out of their ears, right? Whose tomatoes didn't work this time? I'm sorry. Come on over.
I'm like, what happened?
Everybody else has got tomatoes.
Sorry, guys. Lots of people had a
Okay,
hard
so we
time.
had to get out of it in order to be able to fix the problem.
We'll do something else
because
that's
I had
working.
to get documented recording. And we didn't hear from you. So, yes, so what we had to do was exit out so that we could say, got it, it's recording, and now we are going to share screen so that John can
You're recording, because I'm supposed to remind you.
Oh, that, oh, we're
She got, oh yeah, we have very. You guys see it?
Yes, we can see the slideshow now.
Boy, I wish we could.
There we go.
That's not the same
You
one
guys
though.
still see the right thing?
We can on Zoom, yeah.
Okay, but that's not this.
Yeah, but it's not.
Yeah, but it's not. Okay, stand by. Stand by. We'll figure it out.
Now we can see the tree.
Hold on, stand by.
A good sound to them. Oh, yeah.
We are back to work out. We will be back.
Let's see, it's not showing.
It's not showing up. Maybe they're looking.
I can't wait to this. I mean, hybrid. Okay, now we're good.
We can see the slideshow here.
And you can see it there.
You missed it.
How do you do that?
Now on Zoom, we can't see
What is that flower
Now we don't have to go.
Sorry, Facebook people, we're figuring it out. Bear with us.
Oh, they see my video still.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we got it figured out. Yes!
That's okay.
Thank you for your patience as we sort out how this works. Hyper rate has been challenging, has it not? These a couple of years almost now. So, anyhow, yeah, I know, I'm trying to figure out where we were. We're about to introduce our speaker, but what I wanted to share with you, one more thing about Green Drinks is our goals are to bring people together, which we are doing tonight, and it's nice to see you again, as I said. Also to provide a program each time, along with that opportunity to network. And then at the end, we always share community announcements. So if you have something that's appropriate for an environmental community, then we'll give you 1 whole minute and let you go ahead and share that with the community so that we can get you involved in the community. And that's the bottom line in the end. So with that, just a few housekeeping things, I believe. Thank you for your attention to wearing masks the whole time unless you're sipping a drink, and we just can't have food in here, and that's part of making sure we follow the guidelines that Dukes needs to follow, and also for understanding the limited capacity as we go through this time. And then for those of you on Zoom, as we have our presentation this evening, if you turn off your camera, because we are recording it, and then that'll be good for all of us probably. And with no further ado, then I want Cynthia to introduce our super speakers on tonight. Here we go.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for your patience, and I know everybody understands. And by the way, in the future, if anybody knows this stuff better than we do, come on up. We had a really nice helper last month that she basically rescued us, and Anne even said, "Is Elizabeth here?" Anyway, thank you for being here for this special 12th anniversary, which is so awesome. Thank you, Chef Zach. And we are so pleased to be here and so happy. Even though hybrids can be challenging, we're really glad that we can be here in person together, some of us, and so glad to see so many people on Zoom still. So thank you for that. And it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, John Scott. John is a senior chemist at Illinois Sustainable Technology Center at the U of I in Urbana-Champaign. He has degrees, 2 degrees in chemistry and 1 in environmental health and safety from the Illinois State University. His research interests include emerging contaminants such as microplastics, which he's going to be talking about this evening, and PFAS, which is something some of you have been hearing about because there's some legislation up in the state of Illinois around the issues of PFAS, which is found in foam, in fire, and everywhere else. Waste utilization also, and natural products. John has been studying microplastics for the last 7 years and is a member of the International Freshwater Microplastics Network. He and a colleague have been running water samples from our own McHenry County, the environmental defenders, along with Scott Kuykendall and our Water Natural Resources Chair, Cindy Screwford, who could not be here this evening. We've collected samples from the Kishwaukee and the Nippersink on several occasions, and John Scott has been running those samples down at his lab and has some things to report about that. And so that's really how this talk came about this evening. And we're really excited to be able to share with you information about our own watershed and what's happening with microplastics, and also on a regional level as well. So John, thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure.
And come on.
Thank you very much for that great introduction. So yes, my interest is in emerging contaminants, and today we're going to focus on microplastics. I'm going to kind of give you some background, some context to why we're interested in microplastics, and I'm going to show you some of the research that's going on in my group to address this. We're very active in this area. So, since the emergence of mass-produced plastics in the 1950s, the global appetite for these materials has been increasing at an extraordinarily high rate. And here on the left, you can see, it's a little hard to see here on the screen, but you can see there's a, back in about 2015, we were producing about 320 million metric tons of plastic every year, okay? And it's estimated that if we continue down this path, that by the year 2050, we'll be making 1.8 billion metric tons of plastic every year. It's an incredible amount of material. And when you produce as much of this material, you'll have to ask yourself, well, where is it going, right? Okay? So this study here was done in 2015, and actually, because of the pandemic, we are actually finding now that we are north of these estimates. More stuff is being shipped, you know, more plastic, the masks are polypropylene commonly, so we're producing a lot of plastic waste in that regards. So really, we are north of those estimates now. So since back in 2015, it was estimated to date, since the history of plastics, we've made about 8.3 billion metric tons. And as a result of that, it's estimated now that we've made about 6.3 million metric tons of plastic waste. So where does the vast majority of this stuff end up? Well, 79% of it actually ends up in our landfills and our natural environment. And only a small percentage, it's estimated about 9%, is really recycled. So as a result of this, plastic is now ubiquitous in our environment. So let's talk about definitions, okay? And when we say microplastic, we're usually referring to anything that's smaller than 5 millimeters in size. In my mind, it's everything from 1 micron to 5 millimeters. Actually, we're starting to talk about things like nanoplastics and picoplastics, right? We're starting to get interested in the smaller and smaller sizes. And that's important because as these things get smaller and smaller, they have a higher potential to cross biological membranes and actually get into your body, okay? So the size is very important. And the other thing that's very difficult about these materials is they're very complex. Think about all the different plastics that are out there and all the different mixtures of plastics that are out there. So for us analytical chemists, this is a real challenge. In the past, we would look at maybe one class of compounds like polyaromatic hydrocarbons or arsenic or something, but now we're talking about very, very complex macro materials. So primary microplastics are the things like the little microbeads that were in all the cosmetics, and nurdles, which are like base materials for larger plastic, and even there's some plastics using industrial abrasives. So these are what we call the primary microplastics. And you know, when Sherry Mason was going around the Great Lakes and collecting plastic samples, we were finding a vast majority of these microbeads. But thanks to regulation does work. We don't see that anymore. We don't see as many of the microbeads. So now what we're finding, what I believe is more what we call the secondary microplastics. And these are the result of the breakdown of a larger plastic over time due to things like wear, abrasion, UV light, and microbial degradation. And that's really what I believe now is what we're seeing as a secondary microplastics. So where do we find these things? Everywhere. Everywhere we look. So surface water, groundwater, well, I should say not groundwater, but surface waters have been the most intensively studied. There's a lot of data out there. We find them in our sediments, in our soils. We find them in our air and our dust. In fact, we even believe that indoor air is a major source of human exposure. And that makes sense, right? We're surrounding ourselves by textiles and clothing. Our chairs are coated with polyester and polypropylene. So it's no surprise that we're getting a large amount of these. But also even our food and our beverages. In fact, we intentionally add them in a lot of our cosmetics. This image here on the upper left of my pictures here is actually a microfiber we isolated from a canned soda beverage in my laboratory. We were sitting around lunch and we were saying, hey, I wonder if there's microplastics in our Coke. Well, I should say Coke. It's a canned soda beverage. And sure enough, you know, we found one. Strike that if you can. Wastewater, we know, is a major source of microplastics. That makes sense. It's a bottleneck. We're sending all our sewage to these facilities. Our wildlife, we've all seen the pictures of turtles with a straw in its nose, whales peeking up laundry bottles, and birds with their guts exposed. They're cut open with lighters and all kinds of plastics in there. Now, one of the things that my group, or I was involved with, and my group was involved with a couple of years ago, is we were actually the first people to detect microplastics in karst water systems. Now, karst water systems are very open, porous systems, but they're very important because about 25% of all the world's population gets their drinking water from a karst system. So we actually studied some up in the DeKalb, in the Galena area, and we actually looked at, there's a lot of karst systems along the western side of our state, and they actually go up to Wisconsin as well. But we were actually the first ones to report microplastics in these systems. So that was kind of an exciting work. That, in fact, our paper in groundwater was the most cited last year on this topic. So we find these things everywhere. Should we be worried? Okay, is there a concern? And the first thing I believe is a major concern is the sheer persistence of plastics. These things have been designed to last forever. And here's some examples, okay, of some materials and how long it takes for them to degrade. In a cigarette butt, a plastic bag, 5 to 20 years. And in my world, that's a long time. But now, let's look at things like plastic straws, disposable diapers, even fishing nets, up to 600 years to degrade. So I think the sheer fact that these things live forever is a problem. And disposable diapers, that just floored me. A child uses about 7,000 diapers until they're potty trained, right? So our landfills, just think of all the diapers that are going to our landfills every day. Our landfills must be swelling with these things. And these diapers are going to be around longer than 5 times that child's lifespan. And so it's just incredible, you know, that it's just ironic that these materials have been designed to last forever, yet are only intended to be used once to throw them away. Okay, so beyond the persistence, we need to talk about all the other stuff that associates with plastics. And we know that there's a great deal of additives. We are adding all kinds of stuff to plastic. And here's some examples, some metals analysis I did on some beach plastics that we found. And you can see this is actually what I believe is a piece of garden hose. 1.4% lead. Don't drink out of your garden hose. Don't let your dog drink out of your garden hose. Please don't. Because there could be a lot of lead. And this, I believe, is a Mardi Gras bead. 1.2% antimony. And that thing was actually loaded with all kinds of metals. But not only metals, we also add a lot of organic compounds. Like bisphenol A is very notorious. It's an endocrine disruptor. It influences your hormones in your body. We also add things like phthalates to make PVC, make it very flexible. We add flame retardants. So we know a lot of these compounds are problematic. They're endocrine disrupting. They're potential carcinogens. And it's a lot. We add a lot of these in there, high concentrations. So, in addition to additives, I've done a lot of studies where I look at how contaminants absorb the plastics in the environment. You can think of them as like little sponges, right? So we did a study where we took plastics and we put them in a lake. We would come out and pull them out at certain times and look at what was absorbed to them. We've seen all kinds of stuff. Polyaromatic hydrocarbons, which are carcinogens, PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls. We find heavy metals. I've even found algal toxins, pharmaceuticals, personal care products. So the point is, anything that's nearby these guys, it will concentrate them. And then something can come along, a fish can eat them. And then those contaminants will become bioavailable in the gut of an organism. Because the gut of an organism is in a very aggressive condition, it'll readily extract them. So these things are potentially chemical vectors. But let's also talk about biological vectors. So my colleagues at Loyola, they did a lot of work. They look at the microbes that absorb to the plastics in the environment. Imagine a piece of plastic going through a wastewater treatment plant, right? What we find is that, all these pathogen stuff could potentially absorb to them, and they actually become more resistant to the disinfection process. And then they are directly discharged to the environment. So it's kind of like a life draft for these organisms and these systems. And what we find is the diversity of the microbes that attach to the plastic are much different than the diversity of the microbes in the soils and the waters around them. So they're like breeding exotic bacteria, if you will. So the other thing that I completed a study a couple years ago, and I need to plug PFAS, because that's the other thing that I do a lot of work with. And these are these organic forming compounds that people are very interested in. So what I found, though, is that PFAS does not really stick to plastic, but it sticks to the biological material that grows around it. So it's a lot more complex than just plastic, chemicals. It's also, you have a biological component. And even the biofilms and the microbes that grow on these things change how they move through the environment. Something that would normally float, like polyethylene, as it gets a biofilm on it, it could potentially sink. So there's a lot of interesting, and it makes it much more complex, and that's what keeps me up late at night, thinking about this. I'm good. So how did I get into this? About 7 years ago, my colleagues at Loyola, Chicago, they called me up and said, we're finding all this plastic in our water and our biosolids. And I have this unique capability where I can actually tell them what types of plastics they are. It's called pyrolysis, GCMS. That's how I got roped into this about 6 or 7 years ago, but since then, we've really blossomed in all kinds of areas. I've looked at additives and contaminants in plastics. In fact, my group and my colleagues in the United Kingdom, we actually found rare earth elements in plastic, which is amazing. We just published that in the beginning of this year. I think we're the first people to ever actually go and look for these things. And we believe it has to do with mismanagement of recycling. Because electronic waste has a lot of rare earth elements. So we think that somehow they're finding their way back into the system. Nobody wants to put lead in a child's sippy cup, but it gets in there through mismanagement of recycling. So don't stop recycling, but we need to really manage it well. But also we're very interested in how these things move through the environment, their ultimate fate, and even how they weather. I'm going to show you something later on about some studies that we're doing, where we're looking at how they break down over time, which is important. And then also we do a lot of work with developing even methods to analyze these things, which is the Wild West right now. We really need to get a good way and a standardized method to analyze microplastics. And then obviously we do lots of studies where we just get environmental samples and look and see what we report with the methods we develop, such as the work that we've done with environmental defenders and in this group here as well. Yes, actually, let me get a shot of those microplastics.
Can I get some water?
No, I'm sure actually there's probably not microplastics in here. Actually, I need to take a sample. Okay. So, back in 2015, NOAA, they published a great method for analysis of microplastics. And this is where we started because we know that there's a lot of issues out there and everybody needs to get on the same page. And we looked at this and we said, well, this is actually pretty good. And this is what we're going to use as a primer for the methods that we developed. But you're going to see why I'm going to focus on these 2 points. But one of the first things they do in the method is they select a fraction, and we call that 0.3 millimeters. That's 300 micron, okay? So we thought that we could do better in this part, and we did. And I'm going to show you the significance of that. But the other thing, too, is this method that NOAA was using, they also used a sodium chloride solution. And the only importance of that is that sodium chloride will only get you a density of 1.2. But there's a lot of plastic out there that's heavier than that. So we've actually done a lot of work on this density separation. And we've actually improved this step too, so we're taking into account a lot more plastics because we believe a lot of the data out there isn't taking into account things like PVC and polyester. So I'll show you that in a minute. But that's the 2 areas that we've focused on in our method development, if you will. Size is so important, okay? So if you were doing the NOAA method, you would be missing anything less than 300 micrometer. And what we're finding, and if you look in this fraction here, this says 5 to 200 micrometer, it's actually the highest. And what we see is that you go down in particle size, the occurrence goes up. And that makes perfect sense, right? All plastic is breaking down to a smaller and smaller size. So we need to strive to get down to the lowest size that we can see. And right now, my method, I tell people 20 by 20 micron. That's where we're at. We're trying to push it. That's where we're at right now. And this is data from Missouri. In fact, the Arch, I think, was one of the highest samples. Kansas City River was the second, I think. I may have gotten flipped, but you get it. Density is important, okay? So if you follow the closest thing to a standard method in the past, you're only going to be density 1.2, which is great for things like polypropylene, polyethylene. But there are polymers out there like PVC that have a density that's greater than that. And PVC is important because it's the 3rd most produced plastic in the world. In fact, even Teflon has a density of 2, all right? So my group has gone through and looked at all these different salt solutions, and we really like potassium iodide, which gets us to a density of 1.7. I have a special sauce. I can't tell you what it is. It's proprietary. And I will use it on certain occasions when I want to get really high densities. But my point is, I think that the data that we're producing are getting much heavier polymers. So we're counting for more material that could potentially be out there. And this becomes really important when we talk about sediments, because really that's where a lot of the stuff is finally ending up. So the heavier stuff will be down in the sediments as opposed to the water column. Okay, so yeah, right now this is where we're at. We actually we call this the modified NOAA method, but currently we get 20 by 20 micron, and we currently have a nice density limit of about 1.8 to 2.3. So now I need to beat my chest. The way we've been reporting microplast data to this date is all wrong. If you look at the literature, if you read a paper maybe in who's reporting, everybody's reporting on microplastics. Give me an example of someone who's reported on it recently.
PVC.
Thank you. I'm willing to bet you that when they were talking about their water samples or whatever, they were saying 100 particles per liter, or maybe 5 particles per fish. That's a meaningless unit. That means nothing. We can't do anything with that number. And the other thing is, by the time we take that water sample and we go back to the lab and we do all of our magic, that you might have a 1 particle in the environment that's 500 micrometers, but by the time we're done, we might have broken that particle down to 10, 50 micrometer particles. So all that data isn't good. We can't do anything with it. Toxicologists can't work with it. The modelers can't work with it. We can't even compare a site to site. So it's really, we need a revolution in the way that we've expressed these things. So our approach is we try to estimate the mass. And the people that work for me hate me because I make them do detailed measurements, two-dimensional measurements, every piece of plastic. Okay? We can't do the third dimension because, you know, there's no way that with the there's a way, there's several ways, but they'll just take forever and they'll cost, you know, an extraordinary amount of money. But we estimate the mass based on the two dimensions that we measure, and we not only tell you the parts of, well, I normally don't even tell people the number of plastic, I tell them the mass of plastic. We have 2 micrograms of plastic per liter of water. We have 20, and so on. And that's a unit we can use. That's something that we're familiar with. We talk about all contaminants, that's the unit we use. So we think that right now this is the best approach. Is it perfect? No. I believe that what I'm giving you is a lower bounds. I'm telling you that this is the minimum amount. And likely it's higher than that. But right now, what I have in front of me, this is the best that I can do. We think this is very important. In fact, somebody beat me to the punch. I was going to write an opinion paper, but someone actually recently, about a month or two ago, came out in the EST and wrote something very similar. But part of this international network that I'm part of, we all agreed that from now on, this is what we're doing. This is how we're going to report it. And when we review papers, we attack people that write paper. I should say attack. Gently try to push them in the direction of reporting the data this way. So it's so important to do it this way. Okay, so let's talk about, let me show you, I've actually told you this, but let me show you a great example of this. And this is some of the data from McHenry County samples that we've analyzed. And that's on the left, and the Tennessee samples that from another project we were working on here on the right. And I know it's a little hard to see, but you can see the McHenry County samples, we're talking 200 to 250 microplastics per liter, the particles per liter, okay? When we look at these Tennessee samples, we're talking 18, 15, 16 particles per liter. If you were to look at that, you would say, holy cow, McHenry samples is the worst in the world I've ever seen, you know, it's super high. But now let's look at the mass. When we use our approach to mass estimates, they're actually extremely similar. So that means that the plastics that we found in your sample were all much smaller. Okay? It doesn't mean that in the original environment they were smaller, because they could have been older, they could have been weathered, and by the time we did our magic, we could have broken them down. But that's the significance of that. It's very important that we look at it in terms of mass and not number. How am I doing on time? Anybody time?
Ready.
Oh, it's okay. The other thing we wanted to do with these the Fox River and the Nippersink and Kishwaukee, right? Did I say it right? Yeah. Sorry, I'm not from here. Or I am from here, but I don't live here anymore. But one of the things that we wanted to do is look at how these change over time. Because even last year, some colleagues of mine in the UK had published a paper where they intensively sampled a couple of the streams, and they found that it varied a magnitude of, I think it's 8,000. Let me look at it. No, I'm sorry, 8 magnitudes of variation. But they were doing particles per liter, so I'm very skeptical of your data. So I wanted to look and see how these things change over time. Because it makes sense, imagine there's a rain event, right? So then all of a sudden what we're doing is we're washing all the plastic pollution from the landscape into our surface waters, right? So that can essentially influence that. On the other side too, it can also add a lot of water and then dilute the water body as well. So that could be conflicting to that. But also, in the dry season, the water might concentrate and the plastics might stay. So there's a lot of competing factors. But the point is that these things can really vary over time. I believe more so than a lot of the dissolved chemicals that we look at. So we looked at McHenry County samples on October of 2020 and around January 2021. And right here you can see the dip, actually 14 micrograms per liter. But then we went back in January, dropped down. In fact, we couldn't even detect any microplastics, which is really rare for me. I rarely see that, but I guess it's good, right? That's a good thing. But the other thing too, you got to remember, I'm only looking at 20 by 20 micron. There could be plastics that are smaller. So I always have to throw that caveat in there. But it definitely varies. That's the whole point. In fact, even the Kish, you can see it was on the lower end, And then now, to date, this is actually the highest sample I've seen yet. Is the, Kishwaukee Mid is what you guys call it. Although I think there's one on my bench right now that's going to beat it. When I get back to the lab, I'll let you know. Stay tuned. But so far, that's the highest I've seen in terms of mass. Definitely. So definitely a lot of work there. It would be interesting to intensively study a water body and then look at, how it's influenced by precipitation and all these other factors that can change over time. So, let me talk to you about one of the ideas that I've been kicking around. So, I'm very interested in reducing the environmental loading of plastic. That's my goal, is to reduce it getting out there. And I sat down one day and I said to myself, I want to make a difference. Where do I think the vast majority of plastic is coming from in the environment? Well, you remember in the beginning of the talk, I told you that 79% of all of it is going to landfills. Landfills, I believe, are a hotspot for plastic. So you just imagine every day how much plastic we're dumping in these landfills. But I don't think the story of plastic ends at the landfill. These are aggressive conditions. They're designed to break things down. They have high temperatures. And what I believe is going on is the plastic is being broken down to smaller and smaller sizes in the landfill. Okay? So what is about the mid-'80s, ever since if a landfill was built before the mid-'80s, they didn't have to line it. Okay? So, and there's a lot of those out there. I'm finding out there's a lot more out there than I realized. So there you have the potential for these smaller and smaller pieces of plastic to basically start diffusing in the landfill. But the other one, another one that I need to get my hands on is landfills with liners, right? Because that soup, that leachate, that goes, you just imagine what that stuff is like. I've seen it, smelled it, ugh. But anyways, the stuff that comes out of the bottom of the landfill, it's typically sent to a wastewater treatment plant, okay? That's typical. But a wastewater treatment plant is not designed to treat plastic, okay? So when it gets to the wastewater treatment plant, it has two options, right? Because there's no plastic ferry that comes and hauls it away. One option is to be directly discharged in the environment to the effluent. And we know it's about it's about 1%, that's even a high number, is actually directly discharged. The vast majority of the plastic that goes into the wastewater treatment plant actually goes into what we call the biosolids, which is the sewage sludge. Okay? What do we do with that sewage sludge? About 53% of it we land apply it. Then all of a sudden we're taking this material loaded with plastic, we're adding it to our agricultural fields, where then it has the chance to run off into the surface water, get into the groundwater, or get locked up in the soil and then potentially be taken up by our agricultural crops. Okay? So these are the systems that we're, in fact I have funding right now. We started this project to look at, we're trying to do a mass balance. We're looking at how much microplastics is in the leachate, how much is in the influent, how much is in the wastewater effluent, and the biosolids. We're trying to get a handle on this. And this is significant because if my hypothesis is correct, I could treat landfill leachate. This is a manageable value. You know, one of the plants I was working with is 2,000 gallons per day. This is about 10,000 gallons per minute. There's no way you're going to be able to treat for microplastics there. So I want to get a handle on this beast, and then I'm going to start to try to figure out ways to treat it here, and then maybe I can reduce environmental loading by, I don't know, 20, 30, 50%. I don't know yet. I'm still working on this. So but that's the goal. I know there's microplastics here. I just don't think it's practical to treat them there. And obviously, pollution prevention tells us that, you know, that's why I love to outreach people. You guys are doing the right thing, because really we should be stopping it here. But even tomorrow, if we come up with a new material, that we still have thousands of landfills that are going to be doing this for centuries to come. Job security. Crazy system. We never solved the environmental problem, we just moved it from one person to the next. Oh, I love this. This is a great story. So back in 2014, there was a cargo ship that was going to New York, and it dumped one of its cargo cartridges. You know, you've all seen those big things, about 1,500 kilometers east of New York, and it was filled with HP printer cartridges. These things have been showing up. In fact, one just showed up again a couple weeks ago in Florida. And they've been showing up in the United Kingdom, Norway, Azores, Canary. They even come all the way back to Florida. And there's a whole group of beachcombers out there that are collecting these things and setting them. It's a really neat story because now I have some plastic that's really been in the environment. And I've actually, I just submitted the paper this morning to Environmental Science and Technology, where we've actually looked at how these things degrade over time and how they become, how they go from macroplastic to microplastic. So a really interesting study. You don't get too many opportunities like this. And it's really fun, and we've seen a lot of interesting things with additives. Because you can see these cartridges are 2 different colors, and we know that they added titanium dioxide, which is one of the most common additives in plastics. It actually really enhances how these things break down. These were not designed to be in the environment, but they found their way there, and because of that, we see some very interesting things in how they break down. And the cool thing is I went to the surplus on campus, and it took about, they thought it was crazy. I was tearing apart all their old printers, and I actually found a cartridge that matched. That was from the same date. I mean, we could even, I wish you could see the photo, we could even see the lot numbers on these things. So it's pretty cool. And I get beach plastic and stuff that the beachcombers are finding all the time. You go to my office, you just see Legos. I have Legos that are from the 1950s that are still showing up. So it's really, really interesting. I just had to plug that. And the last thing is the nanoscale. Is that my group is really starting, now that we have this method for microplastics, we're going to start looking at nanoplastics. We pitched a project to the Missouri Foundation for Health. We did it a couple months ago. We want to look at nanoplastics in drinking water, because that's where we think we're going to see it. These guys came to us and said, hey, we want you to do a microplastic study in drinking water. And I said, no, I don't want to do that because I don't think you're going to find it. But then I said, but if you look at nanoplastics, so I have some ideas. This is where I'm starting. It's just a technique called fluorescence. I'm going to apply what I already know, what I've already done, but I'm sure it's going to evolve from there. So, but I think it's important that we get down to smaller stuff. So, 35 minutes. I'm sorry, I went 5. I appreciate it for this invite, and I guess I will be happy to take any questions. I will have to repeat your questions, but please.
So my buddy Jim made me do some homework before we came to
Uh-oh.
this.
Oh boy.
There's this high school kid in Ireland that lived by a beach,
Yep.
just polluted with plastics, and he happened to notice if there was oil,
Yes.
it would attract the plastic.
Yes.
So he eventually came up with this idea to put iron oxide or iron, something. Scott was in there.
Iron oxide and vegetable oil.
So that would attract the plastics, and then they could extract the oil with the iron and remove it. It's more retroactive than preventative. Are you familiar with any of that? Just
I am a little
looking
bit.
for some good news.
Absolutely. No, it's not all gloom and doom. I really think that we could solve lots of environmental problems. So first of all, I'm going to repeat the question. The question was regarding the treatment of these things, and the gentleman had spoken about using vegetable oil and iron oxide as a potential absorbent, if you will, for plastics. And yes, there's a lot of people doing stuff like this, but the first thing you have to ask yourself, is it economical? Look how big the ocean is. How much iron and oil, and I don't really think it's a good idea to start adding a bunch of iron and oil to the ocean to try to clean it all up. And I don't mean to belittle it. It's just an incredible daunting task to treat what's already out there in the environment. I don't think that honestly you're going to find any. I hope somebody prove me wrong, please. But I don't think you're going to find an economical and feasible way to do it. I mean, that's why I'm so focused on just source reduction right now. It's just turning the tap off, right? When my basement flooded, that's the first thing I did was, Well, first I threw the cat there to make sure that it was energized, and then I jumped in and closed the faucet where it was leaking. But did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
there's a
you're
lot of-
saying more preventative than
Yeah.
trying to clean up the
Yeah.
whole ocean, which
Yeah, I don't think
makes
it's
sense.
possible. I really don't. I mean, I wish someone would prove me out. Actually, when I was at MIT a couple of Novembers ago, there was a guy, brilliant idea. He built a yacht that went around and would suck up the plastic and convert it to oil. I don't know where he's at now. I bet he's on the Caymans. He's around on his yacht that he got funding for it. Why did I think of that? Very skeptical. And the other thing too is the size too. Like I said, I think that really we need to start thinking about it smaller and smaller size, and it's going to be harder and harder to treat. So here I've gone off on a complete tangent. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, anybody else? Please, I like questions. Yes.
You said after the landfill, that's where you'd like to have a plan for treatment.
Yes.
Now, do you have ideas?
I do have ideas, but I really need to get I need to get to wrap my head around what the beast is, right? I'd like to know what the sizes of the stuff that are coming out of the landfill. I'd like to know what the materials that are coming out of the landfill. So before I can really start to implement ideas, I really need to understand, and I need to see if it's even worthwhile, right? If it's not that really, if my whole idea is bad and it's not really worth it, then that's the plan. But I was thinking about ways to centrifuge. I have a physics guy that works for me, modeler, that we've been working on ways to try to direct flows so we can concentrate the plastics in one side and get the cleaner water stream on the other side. But the other thing I think that might happen is that if I start treating this, I think I might start treating a lot of other contaminants as well, like perfluoroalkylate substances and PCBs and pharmaceuticals and personal care products, because remember those things like that stick. So I might be able to start knocking out other things as well. We'll see. Yes, please.
So,
Oh, I never. Oh, go on.
no, go ahead.
I forgot to ask to repeat her question.
Oh.
And her question was, she was asking
After
the
landfill.
treatment. What are my ideas for treatment? And I'm still working on that. I need to characterize it. I'm sorry, Scott.
So just, I'm going to go back to doom and gloom, I guess.
Oh boy.
So, you were talking about how the volume of plastic production has increased.
So, yeah.
Unfortunately, we're not reducing the amount of plastics that are being processed. The plastics industry is ready to just absolutely expand exponentially. So we're going in the wrong direction, and we need to have some type of data to provide an argument as to why things should be regulated. Plastics themselves can actually be a good thing if it's designed to be recaptured, reused, and at the same level. And so, necessity is the mother of invention, and until the plastics industry has to do that, they're not going to do that. So, as far as like developing data that we can then take, to Congress and say we need to do something, I guess, can you talk about where we are, what we need to do in order to get that data to make a compelling argument to create regulations that will actually make a difference?
Okay, so the question is related to that we're actually going in the wrong direction, we're producing more plastic, we know that, and what kind of data do we need to help guide regulation?
Easy question.
I need another beer. Well, definitely documentation of what we're finding in the environment, right? I mean, if we can go and say that the vast majority of stuff we're finding is polyethylene, then maybe we should be focusing on polyethylene, right? So that would be helpful. I definitely think finding the major point sources is important, because we can say, if it's a landfill, then maybe we can regulate landfill and regulate landfill leachate. The most important is the consumers. They have the pollution prevention hierarchy, and at the very top is source reduction. If we can get people to stop demanding this stuff, because I think that we will make a major dent in it, right? If we just make people realize and think about, all the plastic around them, where does it go, instead of just throwing it away, I think that would be really helpful. But I think we need to tackle it at all those stages. We need innovations in recycling. We need innovations in reusing. Bring the milk ban back. or the milkwoman, I'm sorry, or, yeah. Yes, thank you. Sorry, I'm thinking of the fire, but even, you know, waste to energy, you know, I'm not a big fan of it. I have a lot of colleagues that do plastic to oil, and I'm very skeptical, but I'm interested in it. Because even if I treat microplastics in the leachate, what am I going to do with it after I treat it? Am I going to put it back in the landfill, or does it just repeats the process? So, and you know those guys that do all the beach cleanups, that's great work. But I asked them what they do with the materials after they clean up the beach. Oh, we just throw it away, or we try to recycle it. And in fact, what I'm finding is a lot of stuff they're picking up on the beach, you can't even legally bury in the ground because of a lot of it's electronic waste. And it has heavy metals, and it has, you know, brominated, high bromine. Boy, I've really got off on a tangent because I didn't want to answer your question. And I should have told you that.
I'm enjoying your diatribe.
But, so my point is though, that I think really we need to address it all, and then if we start to stop demanding it, then hopefully, you know, that'll stimulate maybe somebody to come up with a new material, which I think is going to be extremely difficult, but very important.
I understand we have a question from a
Oh.
Zoom guest.
Please.
We have a Zoom question from Everhard. Everhard, you are unmuted.
Hello, Everhard.
Well, thank you for the presentation. It was very good, but what it is we're basically we're saying all the stuff that's there, and what we need is then action to stop it from being there.
Yes.
And I think that one of the first things is all single-use consumer plastic should just be outlawed, period. You cannot count on people that they will reduce significantly. That's a small portion of the people. I had colleagues in California when they outlawed the big plastic bags and got the thick ones. They were paying their 10 cents and they were throwing it afterwards in the garbage. It's unbelievable. And those were fairly intelligent people. Yeah, that was one thing. But the other question is, all the plastics that maybe there's not a good solution, fishing nets, stuff like this. Have you looked at PHA? Which PHA is a biodegradable plastic, 6 months in ocean environment. And I think that at least if you have a plastic that's truly biodegradable within relatively reasonable amount of time, you can eat PHA.
Yeah, I have seen some of that. In fact, we were discussing that earlier. So,
Can you repeat in a nutshell? for
yes,
people
please.
that-
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The first question I got a little. Okay, the first question was about banning of single-use plastic. I don't know if I saw a question in there, but I think that was more of a comment. But I agree with you. That's a great place to start, and right. But I mean, as your second question, you're talking about environmentally friendly plastics, and the BP. I always get.
PHA.
Thank you. That one. Are you sure it breaks down completely? Because the polymer industry used to say, by definition, if something was biodegradable, it would break down to smaller than what you can see. And
That's not a good definition. No, but the PHA is actually some microbes.
yeah, I've seen that too.
As their energy resource, so they like we do ADP or whatever whole bodies, and the studies that I have seen on PHA is that 6 months in the ocean, because the stuff that's corn based is why they say it's compostable, but only in industrial composting. Otherwise, if you throw it in the ocean, it is like all the others.
Yeah. No, I'm not familiar with this polymer in depth because I focus on what I find in the environment. And this is something I'm not finding in the environment, and that's a good thing, right? So, but I mean, honestly, I don't, when it comes to material science, that's not my expertise. And I would have to look into it more. In God I trust, but everybody else showed me the data. So I would need to look into it. I hope to God I'm sorry, I really have a hard time answering that one. But yes, there's
It's okay.
yeah.
You're familiar with it. You're not backing it to the good or it's not. It's used in the thousands or millions of tons, but it's still a super small fraction. As compared to the other. And it has similar properties like
another question.
Oh, I
in
got
the
a
room.
question coming. Okay, should I,
Yancy?
okay, go ahead, Nancy.
Okay, I'm just gonna pull this down for a minute, but, actually, I'm gonna be easy on you, Scott, because I don't have a question for you, I have a question for everyone in the group. And that is, oh, I'm sorry, you used your name wrong. John Scott, sorry.
It's okay.
I was on you, John, sorry. But it's a question for everyone in the room. And I would just like to, we're a small group, I realize that, but, you know, small events can ripple out and make big differences. How many of us belong to a group, maybe your church, maybe your child's sports team, maybe whatever group you can think of that you belong to, that's still using plastic bottles for water, for instance? And could you try to make a little difference, just, you know, by convincing that group to no longer use plastic bottles? I was able to accomplish this with the Illinois Audubon Society, that for all the field trips they used to do, they would bring bunches and bunches of plastic bottles with water for everyone. Finally convinced them, no, everyone has their own, you know, drinking containers. Just bring water in big coolers and everyone can fill their bottles. So we could all make little differences that way with every group that you belong to. It doesn't take too much convincing. So I would just like to urge everyone to, you know, take those small steps.
We'll let you repeat
So
that.
it was the, okay, world, listen to me. Get the word out there. It was talking about plastic, Nancy was talking about plastic bottles and how we need to really extend our networks to, you know, tell people, you know, be more aware and make them more aware of the problems that these are causing. And to add to that, if you want to convince somebody of something, tell them about the economic costs. When you look at the markup for bottled water, it's incredible. I get sick when I see how much people pay for bottled water. And even bottled water has this campaign where they try to make tap water look bad, just so they can increase their sales. In fact, you know, that was what I kind of liked about our microplastic in drinking water study, is if I don't find any, you know, that's a good thing, right? Because I could hopefully move people away from bottled water. So yeah, definitely, I think the economic, when I tell people myself, is I say, hey, look at how much you're paying. Sit down and write that down, and you know, you're going to find it's quite a significant amount of money.
Yes, I'd like to just dovetail on that real quick. Every municipality has to do a water quality report every year showing the analysis of the water. The bottled water doesn't provide that data. So you can go onto your city's website and look up the water quality data from your tap and then ask the people, where's your data for that bottled water? They're not going to be able to provide it because they're not required to. And so you actually know more about your tap water than any bottled water that you're going to be buying at the store. And I think that puts things in a little bit more perspective too.
Scott's point is great. That bottled water really isn't regulated like it is for drinking water. And that, you know, if somebody's worried about the potential for hazardous compounds in their tap water, it's reported. Although, well, I know, I'll just go with that. I'll be back.
Yeah, I was just gonna follow up on that, your point about how some bottled water is very, very expensive and you're paying way, you know, you're overpaying. What I see are people walking out of grocery stores with those huge packs of the very thin, kind of reduce the amount of plastic they use. But it's so cheap, they're walking out with cases and cases and cases of those bottled waters they're taking to sporting events. And the problem is, they're not, you're going, in terms of economics, you're not going far enough because they may be charging a lot for the water, but they're not charging enough for the amount of pollution and everything else, the cost, the true cost of producing that product. Because most companies don't have to pay that. We pay that. They get the profits, we pay for the cleanup, and we don't get it.
So the comment had to do about the hidden costs that we are not realizing, and with not only bottled water, but all plastic. That really, there's a long-term cost that, you know, when this stuff is coming from landfills and it's filling up landfills, that really in the end, we're probably ending up upside down by saving them, you know.
John, we have time for one last question, which is on Zoom.
Okay.
Gigi, director of our schools program in the county.
Oh, my director.
Up next with the question.
Gigi, fire away.
Well, first you need to let go of the director from it. I'm new at this, and we're an environmental education group, and we are working primarily with pre-K through 8th grade as we are coming out of pandemic and trying to get back in there. But I have school-age children who are interested in, increasing the amount of recycling going on at their school. Plastic primarily is what they're looking to involve themselves in. So what I'm looking for is do you have 3 top ideas I could share that would, I can zip around and change around for different age levels to make it comprehensible. I would create a visual to go with it to put by where they're going to recycle their plastic inside their schools, because that's primarily where they would get their education, is through their classroom teachers and through our programs.
Yes. If I don't have it, I tell you what, offline, shoot me an email. I definitely can hook you up with the right people. So no problem there. One thing I like to do though when I talk to kids is I like to show a picture of a fish with a bunch of plastic in its gut, and then I like them to tell me a story about how it got there. And then it's really interesting to see, or maybe show them a bottle and a fish. And so then they start to really think about, wow, all this plastic around me that I'm using and throwing away, where is it going? So that's my initial one. And the rest...
I like that because it's kind of that cross-cutting phenomena approach where you don't give them the answers, but let them speculate as to how it got there.
Exactly. So that's one of my faves, but I'll give you some more later at a price.
Right, sounds great.
And, one thing I do want to say before I get cut off here, you'll probably give me the hook here in a second, but I go to a lot of these emerging contaminant conferences, and the physical sciences are really well represented. We have geologists, we have physicists, we have chemists, but the thing that we're lacking is the social sciences people. I went to an emerging contaminant conference 3 years ago, and there's a psychologist there. And she got up and talked about all the work she was doing about teaching people to think about this. I was so excited. In fact, when I went to MIT, I gave a talk. I thought that, I was going to meet all these engineers. I think the most interesting person I met was an art teacher. Who goes to art for MIT? And if you did, I'm sorry. I don't mean to engineering. And she was asking me for advice about the best colors and the materials. And I was floored on that. So it's really important that we need to pull the social science people in there and engage them in this conversation as well. And I'm starting to see that happen. So that's it.
All right.
Great.
Yes, John, thank you very much. And hope you all learned some new things this evening regarding our plastics and whatnot. And John could hear all the thanks as well. So this is that time when if you'd like to share something that's going on, and I think, Ian, what we should do is get some hands up here, do here, and then Zoom, and then back again. How's that? So we'll start with one announcement here, then we'll get one off. You make that up there. Come on up. Yeah.
Be careful of the cords.
Yeah.
Yes.
Those of you in Zoom, raise your hand if you have announcements.
Yeah.
Okay, last month Pat Dekoff asked you to contact your senators, asking them to put a price on carbon. This month we're asking you to contact your representative. And I'm going to pass out these slips, and down at the bottom there's a Picaro code. All you have to do is use your telephone to scan it. And Pat's going to put cclusa.org/house on chat, on Zoom for those of you at home, so you can use that.
Great, excellent. Thank you so much. That's great. We got one there.
Yeah.
No, I don't have anything else. No hands.
Okay, Scott's next. Come on up, Scott.
Everyone be careful of the cord. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Scott Kuykendall. I'm the Water Resources Specialist for the McHenry County Department of Planning and Development. And as many of you know, we've been working on a project for the past 2 years, developing a water resources action plan for the county. We now have the final version. It's a professionally published version. It's now online. So it's the Water Resources Action Plan, and it really identifies the water resources in the county. It tells you where our water comes from. It tells you what the threats to our water are, and then it provides best management practices to address those threats. So this is intended to be a very user-friendly document. We've got it online, and it's bookmarked, so you can easily find your way to the most interesting topics for you. So for instance, at the beginning of the presentation, John was talking about PFAS. We've got a whole chapter on PFAS, and it's PFAS as it relates to us in this county. So we just have a lot of information in there. So it's at McHenryH2O.com. McHenryH2O.com. And you'll find the link there, and please go visit it and use it, and contact me with any questions. So once again, my name is Scott Kuykendall, and you go to McHenryH2O.com and take a look at that, and you'll have my email address there as well. So we spent 2 years on this, and it's the final product really is amazing. So it's your product out there, so use it. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you for the great research. Okay, all right, way in the back there, Marty's gonna come on up. I think she's representing the food shed tonight, so to get you ready and hungry, everybody. There she is.
Hi, I'm Marty Gorman. I'm here repping the food shed. Do we have any owners here tonight? Yay! Well, we have an owner meeting coming up on Thursday the 9th. It will be hybrid, so if you wish not to come in person at MCC, we will also be Zooming it. So that will be around 7 o'clock, I do believe, but you should be getting emails for that. For those of you that are not familiar with the food shed, it is a community grocery store, a co-op that we are opening up, hopefully in about a year and a month, in 2022 on Route 14 in Woodstock. I have more information for you if you'd like it. And then the third and final thing is those of you that are owners, we are in the middle of our community investment campaign right now. In order to get the doors open, we need to have moolah. And obviously it comes from us because it is our grocery store. So if you get a phone call, please listen, please do what you can, and hopefully see you in about a year as the doors open up. Okay, thank you.
And if you didn't know, the doors will be opening up on Route 14 outside of Woodstock. Nancy, are you ready?
H2O.
Watch the turn. Nancy's got an announcement for us.
Oh, was that called?
Yeah, your hand goes up.
Yeah. Nancy Sheets up with the Environmental Defenders of McHenry County, speaking on behalf of the fundraising committee. We have our giant book sale that we're getting ready for again this year. Last year, of course, we didn't have this because of COVID, and Lake Forest Library, where we get all our books, didn't even collect books last year because of COVID. But this year, yes, the books are arriving on the 19th of this month, this month, since this is September 1st. We would love for y'all to help and come help us unload the books that evening, and then also we've got a week to prepare the sale and get them all the books spread out on the tables in the Algonquin Township Road District Garage, and 2 weeks of the sale. So I'd love to encourage you to come buy the books. They're fantastic, gorgeous books that have been donated to the Lake Forest Library by wealthy people in Lake Forest. They're not library books. They are fancy, nice books. So I'd like to encourage you to do that. But also, if you're Defenders members, in your emails that Destiny sent out today, there's an opportunity to sign up to help volunteer. And we'll hope you'll maybe sign up for 2 or 3 different days, helping with the unloading of the books, and then maybe helping getting the sale prepared, as well as maybe acting as a cashier one of the days. So again, the sale starts on the 25th. I think that's a Saturday. And that day's going to be the hours are going to be a little bit different just because the township has a special recycling drive that day. So, watch for that. The rest of the time, then, I should mention the 24th, evening of the 24th, if you're a Defenders member, you'll be invited to a special first night opportunity to buy those books. So, yeah, please check that out and sign up. Thanks.
Hands here, so Carol's gonna come up.
Okay.
But if you need a great way to burn off some calories, it's really fun to go and unload the books.
Oh yeah.
We have a great time. Come on
Yes,
up.
hi, Carol Larson, and I'm representing the Woodstock Professional Business Women Organization, and they have this weekend a free event, and what it is the Autumn Art Tour, and you can pick up a map at Material Things, which is a place on the square. Also, they are in conjunction with the produce market that's going on that day, and they will have maps available. And you get in your car and you drive to the various pottery makers, artists that are within the community, let's say about no more than 8 miles away. And so it's free, and it supports scholarships within the community in Woodstock.
Yeah, Kevin, come on up. We have one last one, I believe, coming from Kelly. There she is.
Hi, Kelly Wagner. So I'm on the county board, and I just wanted to let you guys know that you've probably heard about the solar farm that's going in on near Marengo, and how many zoning meetings there have been. So they're on their 3rd one, which will probably be their final one. And if you're interested in going, because they do set out a bunch of chairs, they expect a lot of people, it's September 9th at 1:30 at the Woodstock Government Building. And if you have any questions, you can always contact me or Cynthia or Nancy.
We'll be there, Kelly.
Okay, good.
All right, thanks. Last call for announcements. I think we're good. No, we're good. So next month, remember, we're going to be talking about the green energy bill, we hope, and hearing good results from that. So please join us either back here or on Zoom, and we'll be happy to have you. Meantime, thank you for your support for 12 years. If you have a cup, raise it up, and a toast to all of you for your support and good cheer and keeping going forward. Right? I'll share with you one quick quote that you've heard often from me if you've been coming to Green Drinks, because we've got a lot going on in our world, and so hope is a verb with your sleeves rolled up. Don't forget. So keep at it, keep going, and we'll see you next month. Thank you, everybody, for coming and for your help tonight.
Are you able to find it?